History is full of moments when the world seemed to tilt on its axis, when old certainties shattered, and new powers rose from the ashes of what came before. The fall of Rome, the Mongol invasions, the voyages of discovery across unknown seas. But among these turning points, few are as dramatic or as symbolic as the rise of the Ottoman Empire and its most iconic conquest, the capture of Constantinople in 1453. It was more than just the fall of a city. It was the end of an age, the closing act of the medieval world and the dawn of a new global order. In this episode, we will dive deep into the story of the Ottomans, their humble beginnings on the frontier of Anatolia, their astonishing military and political rise, the breathtaking siege that toppled the greatest city of Christendom, and the far-reaching consequences that reshaped Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. This is not only the story of empires clashing, but of how one empire's triumph marked the symbolic end of the Middle Ages. To understand the Ottomans, we must begin on the windswept plains of Central Asia and the rugged frontiers of Anatolia. The Ottoman dynasty traced its origins back to the Turkic peoples who migrated westward from the steppes. By the 11th century, the Seljuk Turks had entered Anatolia, clashing with the Byzantine Empire. After their victory at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, the Turks flooded into the region, forever changing its cultural and political landscape. The Byzantine Empire, once the proud heir of Rome, was weakened. Crusaders sacked Constantinople itself in 1204 during the Fourth Crusade, leaving the empire fragmented and vulnerable. Out of this chaos, smaller Turkish principalities, known as beyliks, emerged across Anatolia. Among them was a small frontier state led by Osman I, from whom the Ottomans take their name. Around 1299, Osman declared independence from the Seljuks, carving out a realm in northwestern Anatolia. His followers were warriors of the frontier, the Ghazis, who saw themselves as holy fighters against the Christian Byzantines. What began as a small principality wedged between larger and older powers would soon become one of the most formidable empires in history. The Ottoman strength lay not only in their military prowess, but also in their adaptability. They absorbed influences from Persian, Arab, and Byzantine traditions, blending cultures and governing with pragmatism. Their early leaders encouraged migration, trade, and religious tolerance, building loyalty among diverse peoples. By the 14th century, they were expanding rapidly into the Balkans. In 1389, they defeated the Serbs at the Battle of Kosovo. In 1396, they crushed a coalition of European knights at Nicopolis. The Ottoman advance seemed unstoppable until they were suddenly thrown into crisis by the great conqueror from the east, Timur, also known as Tamerlane. In 1402, at the Battle of Ankara, the Ottomans suffered a devastating defeat at Timur's hands. Sultan Bayezid I was captured and the empire nearly collapsed. But unlike so many states before them, the Ottomans endured. After years of civil war, they re-emerged stronger under the leadership of Mehmed I and his successors. By the mid-15th century, under Sultan Murad II, they had regained their power, consolidating Anatolia and pressing deeper into Europe. But it would be Murad's son, one of the most remarkable figures in world history, who would fulfill the empire's destiny. His name was Mehmed II, remembered forever as Mehmed the Conqueror. The stage was set in the early 1450s. The Byzantine Empire, once a superpower, had dwindled to a shadow of its former self. By then, Constantinople was essentially an isolated city-state, surrounded on all sides by Ottoman territory. Yet it was no ordinary city. Founded by Constantine the Great in 330, Constantinople was the jewel of the Eastern Mediterranean. Its massive Theodosian walls had stood for 1,000 years, repelling countless sieges. The city was a beacon of Christianity, wealth, and imperial heritage. For centuries, rulers across Europe and Asia had dreamed of taking it. None had succeeded. But Mehmed II, ascending the throne in 1451 at the age of just 19, was determined to succeed where all others had failed.
Mehmed was not only ambitious, but also brilliant. He spent years preparing meticulously for the conquest. He secured peace treaties with Hungary and Venice to prevent interference. He built up his army into one of the most formidable forces of the age, numbering perhaps 80 to 100,000 men. Most importantly, he revolutionized siege warfare. He commissioned the construction of massive cannons, designed by the Hungarian engineer Orban. These bronze monsters were capable of hurling stone balls weighing over half a ton, enough to shatter even the strongest walls of Constantinople. To cut off the city by sea, Mehmed built the fortress of Rumeli Hisari on the Bosporus, giving him control over naval traffic and isolating the Byzantines from aid. On April 6, 1453, the siege of Constantinople began. Inside the city, Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos prepared for the end. He commanded only about 7,000 defenders, including a few thousand mercenaries and volunteers from Italy. The walls of the city stretched for miles, but manpower was scarce. Still, morale was high. Constantinople had withstood sieges before. Many believed the city was divinely protected, that it could never fall. For nearly 2 months, the battle raged. Mehmed's cannons pounded the walls day and night. Assaults were launched again and again, only to be repelled by the desperate defenders. The Golden Horn, the great harbor, was protected by a massive chain stretched across its entrance. But Mehmed outmaneuvered them. In one of the most daring feats of the siege, he had ships hauled overland on greased logs to bypass the chain, bringing his fleet into the Golden Horn itself. The defenders were shocked. Suddenly, the city was under attack from all sides. By late May, Constantinople was crumbling. Supplies were running out, the walls were breached in several places. On May 29, 1453, Mehmed launched his final assault. Waves of soldiers stormed the walls, first irregular troops, then Anatolian forces, and finally his elite janissaries, the empire's most feared warriors. The defenders fought valiantly. Emperor Constantine himself was said to have cast off his imperial regalia and plunged into battle, fighting to the death alongside his men. His body was never definitively found. By dawn, the city had fallen. The Ottomans poured through the gates. Mehmed rode into Hagia Sophia, the great cathedral of Christendom, and ordered it converted into a mosque. The 1,000-year-old Byzantine Empire was no more. The fall of Constantinople sent shockwaves across the world. In the immediate aftermath, the Ottomans established their new capital in the city, renaming it Istanbul. From this base, they expanded further into the Balkans, the Middle East, and North Africa. The Ottoman Empire would grow into one of the largest and most enduring empires in history, lasting until the early 20th century. For Europe, the fall of Constantinople was both a tragedy and a catalyst. The last vestige of the Roman Empire was gone, leaving Europe exposed to Ottoman expansion. Within decades, Ottoman armies would be at the gates of Vienna, but it also spurred new directions. With land routes to Asia increasingly dominated by the Ottomans, Europeans turned to the seas in search of new passages. In a sense, the fall of Constantinople helped ignite the age of exploration. Portuguese ships rounded Africa. Christopher Columbus sailed westward across the Atlantic. The world was about to open up in ways unimaginable to those who had fought on the walls of Constantinople. Historians often mark 1453 as the symbolic end of the Middle Ages. Why? Because the fall of Constantinople represented the collapse of the medieval world order. The Byzantine Empire, a direct continuation of Rome, was gone. The Christian East had fallen, and a new Islamic superpower had taken its place. The Ottomans' use of gunpowder artillery showed that the age of castles and walled cities was ending. No fortress, however mighty, could withstand modern cannon fire. Warfare itself had entered a new era. Meanwhile, the cultural consequences were profound. Greek scholars fleeing the fallen city carried manuscripts and knowledge to Italy, fueling the Renaissance. Ancient texts preserved in Constantinople helped spark a revival of classical learning in the West. Thus, the fall of Constantinople was not only a geopolitical earthquake, but also a turning point in human thought, art, and science.
The Ottoman Empire would go on to dominate much of southeastern Europe, Western Asia, and northern Africa for centuries. At its height in the 16th and 17th centuries, under rulers like Suleiman the Magnificent, it was one of the most powerful states in the world. But its legacy reaches far beyond borders and battles. The conquest of Constantinople forever altered the balance between East and West. It reshaped trade, politics, and religion. It marked the end of medieval Christendom's dominance and the rise of a new age of empires, exploration, and global interaction. Even today, the echoes of that moment in 1453 linger. Istanbul remains one of the world's great cities, a bridge between continents and cultures, bearing layers of history from Rome, Byzantium, and the Ottomans. When we speak of the end of the Middle Ages, we are really speaking of transformation, of the moment when the old world gave way to the new. And at the heart of that story stands the Ottomans, ambitious, relentless, and victorious. The fall of Constantinople was not just the end of an empire, it was the end of an era, and in its place, the modern world began to emerge.